Let's explore a really common context for awkwardness and inappropriateness: email. Email has become a key medium through which students, instructors, and staff interact in the university community. Instructors typically list their email address on the course syllabus, but those addresses are often pretty easy to find online as well. As technology has moved email from something tethered to a heavy desktop to handheld devices we can access anywhere, it's gotten easier and easier to send emails anytime, anywhere, and for any reason. It's also easy to forget that emails turn into permanent digital records. Their content reflects on both you and your university. Let's look at some of the norms governing digital communication, including when to email, how to compose an email, what to say, and why this all matters. There are 3 main tips that can help guide you about when to email. First, aim to ask informed questions. Second, show attention and planning. And third, consider alternatives to email when appropriate. The number one thing your professors and staff community want me to remind you is that it's better to ask informed questions rather than lazy ones. Emails take time to reply to, and oftentimes that's time well spent. After all, people who work at universities love to be helpful, and spending a few minutes answering an email can be a really effective way to do just that. Yet, as you can probably imagine, an alarmingly high number of emails get sent at universities asking for information that's readily, clearly, or publicly available. And so spending a few minutes and then ultimately hours per week answering mundane, repetitive emails can get frustrating and feel like misspent time. So try to avoid asking a question by email instead of doing a few minutes of your own reading or checking or cross-referencing. As someone who values other people's time, it's important to do your own due diligence by first checking syllabus documents or assignment sheets, course websites, and other available resources. Make sure your recipient hasn't already done the work of making the answer easily available to you. On this note, developing peer support networks can also be really helpful. That way, if you miss a class announcement or information due to an absence, you can comfortably ask a friend before relying on email to an instructor or TA. Another good tip is to be prepared and to try to see problems coming in advance. There's an old saying that says, "A lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine." If you wait until a crisis has already unraveled, oftentimes people will be less able to help you, even if they are willing. On the other hand, if you can spot scheduling conflicts or other problems before they become emergencies, you'll find that your email recipient will have more time and flexibility to help you. Finally, consider alternatives to email whenever possible. Before sending off that late-night email, consider whether a brief in-person conversation might cover the same thing. And maybe not. If it's appropriate to have some sort of written documentation or paper trail, then maybe an email makes sense. But if you're looking for a longer explanation or some more detailed advice or some feedback, then perhaps an in-person conversation with your instructor or TA would be more appropriate. Consider making arrangements for a chat during a class break or after lecture, or even better, a visit to office hours. Please don't let any of this discourage you from seeking help when you have a fair question or need support. You'll find that emails often really are the best way to communicate effectively for both you and for your recipient. The next important dimension of this topic is how to compose an appropriate email in an academic setting. And here there are 5 elements that I'd emphasize. First, have an effective subject line that mentions the topic you'd like to talk about, and consider maybe including your course code or title as well to help your recipient sort their email. Second, include an appropriate greeting or salutation. Don't be rude, overly familiar, or too informal with how you address people. Third, ensure that your message has clear content. Try to articulate any questions clearly and share all the important information that you need to give to help get a good response. Fourth, use an appropriate style. Try to use capitalization and write in full sentences. Avoid semi-formal writing using slang or short forms or text messaging abbreviations. It hopefully goes without saying, but definitely avoid racist, sexist, homophobic, or other exclusionary language. And finally, use a signature line that mentions your full name and any other relevant information like your student number, your tutorial number, and so on. One of those points is worth discussing for a minute. Making sure you give an appropriate greeting or salutation goes a long way to showing respect for your recipient and demonstrating your professional and interpersonal skills. This is actually a point of big concern for many instructors, TAs, and staff. Many students make the awkward mistake of skipping a greeting or salutation altogether and just sending off a text message style note. More commonly, they include an informal, overly familiar, or even insulting salutation. Here are some examples. Hey, yo, yo miss, hey bro, hey boss, yo guy, yo sir. Miss and sir are very common in high school culture and are often, though not always, considered acceptable in that context. But at the university level, they're seen as less appropriate or even a bit rude. Miss is especially seen as outdated and problematic, focusing on a woman's gender rather than her identity or role. Sir is perhaps less loaded, but similarly feels like a lackadaisical stand-in for real names and titles. More appropriate greetings are things like hello, good morning, good afternoon, and even sometimes hi. As for what to call people, this is where social norms and cues come in. You really have to sort of make some effort to get to know your recipient's role, status, and preferences. You don't have to be a mind reader, and you may have inevitable uncertainty, but the key is to try to be thoughtful and respectful. Dr. Last Name is a relatively safe bet, especially if you know that your recipient has a doctoral or medical degree. That sort of information is usually available on syllabuses and websites. Yet many instructors might still be in the process of earning their doctorate, or maybe experienced experts with qualifications other than doctor. And so Professor Last Name is also a safe bet, especially for instructors. Mr. Last Name and Ms. Last Name are sometimes appropriate, especially where no other titles are applicable. Addressing a recipient by their first name is sometimes appropriate if the person has invited you to do so. Instructors are sometimes comfortable with this, but sometimes not. The best idea is to just ask your instructor what he or she prefers. You can also pay attention to how he or she signs emails and look for cues. The second best idea is to just try your best, being respectful, following the tips I've just mentioned to sort of choose a semi-formal salutation. If you're feeling uncertain, then maybe add a little note, something like, "Is this how you prefer to be addressed?" It'll show that you're aware of the uncertain norms and that you're trying to be thoughtful. Put it this way, as long as you don't just put yo or hey, you should be fine. As with anything you write, it's worth reviewing your emails before sending them in order to make sure that you've expressed yourself clearly. When using email, it's worth remembering a few final points. Be aware that using a university or college email address may come along with certain usage responsibilities under the Student Code of Conduct. Remember also that as with all written communication, emails are also subject to laws around defamation, copyright, obscenity, fraudulent misrepresentation, and wrongful discrimination. Be sure to respect the privacy of others by not disclosing their personal information. So be thoughtful about what you include in email, since no medium is completely secure against hacking, theft, or misappropriation. By being thoughtful about how you use technology, you can better use it to build positive relationships and accomplish your learning goals.